Senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge,
good morning, Mark.
I found it interesting that California did not file this federal case in Los Angeles or in the state capital of Sacramento. They ran to the most liberal court in the state, San Francisco, and they didn't get an immediate temporary restraining order or a temporary victory.
Okay, so they don't choose where the case ends up. It's filed with the clerk of the court, and then the clerk decides where it's going to go. However, to your point, they obviously had a judge who was ideologically simpatico with their case, but the law says in order to restrain the government, which is what Gavin Newsom wants to do, restrain the president, restrain the Secretary of Defense, without a hearing, you have to show a couple of things: immediate and irreparable harm to the plaintiff, the governor of California, and the likelihood of success to the plaintiff, the governor of California. The state was unable to show that. Now, there was no oral argument. It was just the papers being filed. I've read the papers. They're very professionally prepared. They cite all the right cases. They make all the right arguments, but they're unable to show irreparable harm. They will have a second opportunity tomorrow when the federal government will have responded by today, and the court will hold an oral argument. It's hard for me to predict which way this will go, except I will say historically, judges have been reluctant to issue orders in the middle of a conflagration like this in which people could die and property could be destroyed. They prefer to rule on these things after they're over.
And we also, this is not new ground. I mean, as we've talked about over and over, especially this week, I mean, this action was taken by Eisenhower in 1955 or 57, I believe. Kennedy took it in the early 60s. Lyndon Baines Johnson did the exact same thing in the mid-1960s. All presidents sending in the National Guard, federalizing them without the request or permission of the state's government.
You know, there's an interesting little quirk in the law here. If the National Guard goes in under the command of Governor Newsom, they can engage in law enforcement activity. They can arrest, they can be witnesses, they can bring prisoners to jail, they can interrogate the prisoners. If they go in under the command of President Trump, which is the way they are now, they cannot engage in law enforcement. They can only stand there and provide protection if they or the entities they're protecting are provoked. So in one respect, sending them in there has diminished the law enforcement activity on the ground. Now, look, Gavin Newsom says the LAPD, the LA Sheriff, the California Highway Patrol, the massive California police apparatus are enough to resolve this. Yet, Sheriff himself says we welcome anybody's help. Well, of course they're going to welcome anybody's help. It's a mess there, and it's going on 24/7. As you were just discussing a few minutes ago, it's well-financed.
It's very interesting. In a way, also, will Barack Obama play a role in this? Because you and I have talked about this. He sued, I think it was Arizona, because they wanted to enforce immigration law. Immigration law, the Supreme Court said, is the purview of the federal government.
Correct.
So is Barack Obama actually going to help Donald Trump's case in some way? Well,
when that Arizona case came down, the Supreme Court said immigration is exclusively the area of the federal government. The Constitution seems to indicate otherwise, but the courts have been consistent on this since 1886 in a case called the Chinese Exclusion Act. A horrible name for
a little bit
for litigation,
yeah.
But that's for legislation. But that's the way they did it in that day. Is the issue immigration, or is the issue law and order on the streets? Is the immigration federalism, respect for the ability of the state to regulate what's going on, or is the issue the Constitution? This is what a federal judge is going to have to resolve. The protesters are trying to interfere with a legitimate federal function, the enforcement of immigration law. How far can they go to express their views before free speech becomes criminal interference?
And so you're going to get a federal judge, then the most liberal appeals court in the land in San Francisco,
and so guess
and then
where
ultimately
this
the Supreme
up?
Court.
Back into John Roberts' desk.
In a matter of minutes. All right,
Probably.
Judge, we'll keep an eye on it. Thanks.
Right. Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.